Hi everyone, so in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to crochet these cute little dolls with the striped bonnets. So for these dolls you will need a 4mm crochet hook and DK weight yarn. So thank you very much for watching, and please make sure to subscribe to my channel for more crochet videos. And when you subscribe, make sure that you click the little bell button next to the subscribe button so that you receive notifications when I upload a new tutorial. So to begin your doll, you want to start off by making a magic circle. So to do a magic circle, take your yarn and take your finger and wrap the yarn around your finger once. And you then want to wrap the yarn back over your finger to create a cross, like that. You then want to take your crochet hook and go underneath the first loop of the cross, and you may need to pull it up a little bit, but go underneath this first loop. And then using your crochet hook, pick up the second loop of the cross and pull it through. And you can then take your finger out, and there we have a magic circle, and we are ready to begin round one. So to begin round one, you want to chain one, and this chain one does not count as a stitch. This just locks our magic circle into place. So now for round one, we are going to work 5 single crochets into the magic circle. So 5 single crochets. So you want to go down into the magic circle, yarn over and pull up a loop, and then yarn over and pull through both loops on your hook. So there we have 1 single crochet, and now you want to do that again. So go into the magic circle and work another single crochet, and keep going until you have 5. So there I have worked those 5 single crochets. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And now to finish off this round, you want to close up your magic circle. So to close up the magic circle, take this end or this tail here and simply pull it nice and tight. So pull it as tight as you can, and that will close up the circle. And there we have finished round 1, and we're ready to move on to round 2. So we are now on to round 2, and this round is a really easy round. We're just going to do 2 single crochets into every single stitch. So you want to go down into the first single crochet from last round, and if you're not sure which stitch to go into, then you can count back 5 stitches. So count back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you want to go into this stitch, the first single crochet from round 1, and work your first single crochet into this one, like that. But now before you work your second single crochet into that stitch, you want to take a stitch marker, and if you don't have one of these, you can just use another piece of yarn in a different colour, and you want to place the stitch marker into that stitch that we just worked, so into the first stitch of round 2. So we're going to place the marker into that first stitch there, like that. So like that. So there we have placed a stitch marker into the first stitch of round 2, the stitch that we just worked. And the reason that we are doing this is we are not going to be using any slip stitches throughout our doll. So we're not going to be working any slip stitches at the end of the rounds. We're just going to be working in continuous rounds, kind of in a big spiral. So we need to use a stitch marker to mark the first stitch of every round. So what we'll do is we'll place a stitch marker into the first stitch of round 2 like we have just done, and then we'll work all the way around, and then when we reach the stitch marker, we know we have come to the end of the round, and we can remove the stitch marker and move on to the next round. So our stitch marker will move with every round that we do. So you want to place a stitch marker into the first stitch of each and every round. So now we are going to do our second single crochet into that same stitch. So you want to go down into that same stitch, the first single crochet of round 1, and work a second single crochet. And now you want to go into the next stitch and do 2 into this one, 2 single crochets. And then do 2 into the next. And just keep repeating this all the way around so you know you have come to the end of the round once you reach your stitch marker. So there I have come to the end of round 2, and at the end of that round you should have 10 stitches. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10 single crochets, and we have reached our stitch marker. So the next stitch has the stitch marker in it, so we know we have come to the end of round 2, and now we can move on to round 3. So to begin this round you want to remove your stitch marker. So we're going to remove the marker. And we're going to start off by doing 2 single crochets into the first stitch. So you want to go down into this first one and do 2 single crochets. So there's 1, and before we work the second single crochet into that stitch, we're going to pick our stitch marker back up and place it into that stitch that we just worked to say that that is the first stitch of round 3. So place the marker into that stitch. And now you want to work a second single crochet down into that same stitch there. So go down into the same one and work a second single crochet. And now into the next stitch we're going to do 1 single crochet. So go into the next stitch and just work 1 single crochet. So there we have done 2 single crochets into one stitch and 1 single crochet into the next, and we're going to keep repeating this all the way around for round 3. So we're going to go into this next stitch here and do 2 single crochets both into this one. So 1 and 2. And then into the next stitch we're going to do 1 single crochet. So go into this next one and work 1 single crochet, and just keep repeating 2 1 2 1 all the way around. Finished working that all the way around for round 3, and at the end of that round you should have 15 single crochets, and now we can move on to round 4. So to begin this round you want to remove your stitch marker, and we're going to start off by doing 2 single crochets into this first stitch here. So you want to do your first single crochet into that stitch, and then place your stitch marker into that one to mark that that is the first single crochet of round 4. And now you want to work your second single crochet down into that same stitch. And now we're going to do 1 single crochet into the next stitch, and then 1 single crochet into the next one. So there we have done 2 single crochets into one stitch, and then 1 single crochet into each of the next 2 stitches, and we're going to repeat that all the way around for round 4. So you want to do 2 single crochets into the next one, and then 1 single crochet into the next, and 1 into the next. And just keep repeating 2 1 1 2 1 1 all the way around. And like I said, you know that you have come to the end of the round when you reach your stitch marker. So when you have worked into this last stitch here before your stitch marker. So keep repeating that for round 4. So I have finished working that for round 4 and I have reached my stitch marker, and at the end of that round you should now have 20 single crochets, and now we can move on to round 5. So to begin this round you want to remove your stitch marker, and round 5 follows the same pattern as the previous round, but in this round we're going to do 2 single crochets into 1 stitch and then 1 single crochet into 3 stitches all the way around. So you want to do 2 single crochets into this first stitch here, placing your stitch marker into the first one that you work. Like that. And now you want to do 1 single crochet into each of the next 3 stitches. So 1 into the next, 1 into the next, and 1 into the next. And you just want to keep repeating this all the way around for round 5. 2 1 1 1 2 1 1 1. So I have finished working that all the way around, and at the end of that round you should have 25 single crochets, and now we can move on to round 6. So you want to start off by removing your stitch marker, and this round follows the same pattern as the previous rounds, but in this round we're going to do 2 single crochets into 1 stitch and then 1 single crochet into each of the next 4 stitches all the way around. So we're doing 2 1 1 1 1 all the way around for round 6. So you want to start off with 2 single crochets into the first stitch, placing your stitch marker into the first one that you work. Like that. And now you want to do 1 single crochet into each of the next 4 stitches. So there's 1, 2, 3, and 4. And just keep repeating that for round 6. So it follows the same pattern as the last few rounds, we just have more single crochets in between the 2 single crochets. There we have come to the end of round 6, and at the end of that round you should have 30 single crochets, and now we can move on to round 7. So you want to remove your stitch marker, and this round again follows the same pattern as the previous round, we just have more stitches again in between our sets of 2 single crochets. So in this round we're going to do 2 single crochets into 1 stitch and then 1 single crochet into each of the next 5 stitches all the way around. So you want to do 2 into this first stitch, placing a stitch marker into the first one that you worked to mark the first single crochet of round 7, and then when we reach the stitch marker we know we have come to the end of the round and we can move on to the next one. So do 2 single crochets into that first stitch, and now you want to do 1 single crochet into each of the next 5. So do 1 into the next, 1 into the next, 1 into the third one along, 1 into the fourth, and you might be able to notice that I'm really trying to get tight tension here. I really like to have tight tension when I do amigurumi, and that way it just makes your work look so much neater. So there I have 4 and then 5. So there I have 2 single crochets into the first stitch and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we're just going to keep repeating that all the way around for round 7. So there we have come to the end of round 7, and at the end of that round you should have 35 single crochets. And now we can move on to round 8, and round 8 is our last increase round at this point. So you want to start off by removing your stitch marker, and this round follows the same pattern again, but we're going to do 2 single crochets into 1 stitch and then 1 single crochet into each of the next 6 stitches all the way around. So do 2 into this first stitch, and remember to place a stitch marker into the first one that you worked to mark the first stitch of this round. And then do your second single crochet into that same stitch. So there we have 2 single crochets into the first one, and now you want to do 1 single crochet into each of the next 6 stitches, and then you want to repeat that again, 2 into the next and then 1 into 6, and just keep repeating this for round 8. So I have finished working that all the way around for round 8, and like I said, that was our last increase round, and at the end of that round you should have 40 stitches, and it's really important that you have that number, so I would recommend that you quickly go back and just double check that you do have 40, and if you do, then we can move on to round 9. So we are now on to round 9, and for the next 13 rounds, so for rounds 9 all the way through to the end of round 21, you just want to do 1 single crochet into every single stitch. So to begin each round, you want to remove your stitch marker and then work 1 single crochet into the first stitch, and remember to place the stitch marker back down into that stitch, and then just do 1 single crochet into every single stitch until you reach the stitch marker, so until you reach the end of the round. And in each round you should find that you have 40 single crochets, so you want to do that all the way around for rounds 9, 10, 11, 12 up to the end of round 21. I would definitely recommend having a little piece of paper and keeping a note of what round you are on, or if you have the written pattern, I have created a chart on there which you can tick off as you go to keep track of what round you are on, as it can be really tricky to remember which number you're on. And it's really important that you keep using your stitch marker correctly, so that you remove it at the start of every round, work 1 single crochet into the first stitch, and then place the stitch marker into that stitch to mark the first stitch of the new round. So it's really important that you keep using your stitch marker. So you want to do 13 rounds of 1 single crochet into every single stitch. So I'm going to begin round 9, which is the first round. I'm going to remove the stitch marker, work 1 single crochet into the first stitch, and I'm trying to keep really tight tension here to keep it nice and neat, and then place the stitch marker into that first stitch, don't forget that, and then work 1 single crochet into the next stitch, and then 1 into the next, and just keep doing that all the way around, and then keep repeating that for 13 rounds. So I have finished working those rounds, so I have come to the end of round 21, and this is what you should have. And now we can move on to round 22, and round 22 is going to be our first decrease round. So what you want to do is remove your stitch marker, and we're going to start off by doing 6 single crochets, or 1 single crochet into each of the first 6 stitches. So go into the first stitch and do 1, placing the stitch marker into that stitch, and then do 1 single crochet into the next one, and keep going until you have 6. So like that. And now over the next 2 stitches we are going to work a stitch called 2 single crochets together. So when we do 2 single crochets together, we are doing 2 single crochets, 1 into each stitch, but we are not going to complete either of them, and then we're going to complete them both together at the same time. So we are effectively turning 2 stitches into 1. So you want to go down into the next stitch here, just as you would with a normal single crochet, and yarn over and pull up a loop. But usually we would yarn over and pull through these 2 loops here, but you do not want to do that. You want to stop here and leave this single crochet incomplete and move on to the next one. So go down into the next stitch and yarn over and pull up a loop, just as you would with a normal single crochet, but you do not want to complete this single crochet either. So there we have 2 incomplete single crochets, and you should have 3 loops on your hook, and you want to yarn over and pull through all 3 to complete the stitch. So there we have done 2 single crochets together, and we have turned 2 stitches into 1. And we're going to keep repeating that all the way around for round 22. So we're going to do 6 single crochets, then 2 single crochets together, then 6 more single crochets, then 2 single crochets together, all the way around. So we're going to do 6 more single crochets. And now do 2 single crochets together over the next 2 stitches. Like that, and keep repeating that for round 22. Finished working that all the way around for round 22, and at the end of that round you should now have 35 stitches. So we have cut out 5 stitches, and now we can move on to round 23, and this is just a nice easy round of plain single crochet. So we're just going to do 1 single crochet into each stitch for round 23, and in this round you should have 35 stitches. So I'm going to go into my first stitch. I've already removed my marker, so I'm going to go into the first one and do 1 single crochet, and then do 1 into the next, and just keep repeating that for round 23. So there we have finished working that for round 23, and at the end of that round you should have 35 stitches. And now we can move on to round 24, and this is another decrease round, and it's very similar to round 22, but in round 22 we did 6 single crochets and then 2 single crochets together all the way around, and in round 24 we're going to do 5 single crochets and then 2 single crochets together all the way around. So you want to do 5 single crochets, 1 into each stitch, like that. And now you want to do 2 single crochets together over the next 2 stitches. So just as we did before. And keep repeating that all the way around. 1 single crochet into 5 stitches, then 2 single crochets together over the next 2, and keep repeating that. So there I have finished working that all the way around for round 24, and at the end of that round you should have 30 stitches. So we have cut out another 5 stitches, and now we can move on to round 25, and this round is another round of plain single crochet. So it's nice and easy. You just want to do 1 single crochet into every single stitch, and you should find that you have 30 single crochets in that round. So there we have finished round 25. So this is what you should have at the end of that round, and you can see we are starting to decrease. So we have started at the bottom here and we have come up and out, and now we're coming in, and then we're eventually going to make it up to the neck, and then we will do the head. So we're on round 25, we've just finished that round, and now we can move on to round 26. So to begin this round, you want to remove your stitch marker, and this is another decrease round, but in this round we're going to be doing 4 single crochets and then 2 single crochets together all the way around. So we have less stitches in between our sets of 2 single crochets together with each decrease round that we do. So you want to start off with 4 single crochets, like that, and I'm still trying to keep really tight tension to make it nice and neat. And now we're going to do 2 single crochets together. And just keep repeating that for round 26. So we are cutting out another 5 stitches in this round. So there we have come to the end of round 26, and at the end of that round you should have 25 stitches. And now before we move on to the next round, so before we move on to round 27, we are going to add some stuffing to our doll. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this yarn out. So I'm going to pull a big loop so it doesn't come undone, and you can remove your stitch marker if you like, as sometimes it can get tangled up in the stuffing. And before you add any stuffing, you need to make sure that this end from where you made your magic circle at the beginning has been pulled through to the outside. And now what we're going to do is we're going to take some toy stuffing, and I'm just using a polyester toy stuffing, and we are going to add some to our doll. And at this point you don't need to add it all the way up to the top, as if you do that it can be quite hard to do the next round, but it's just really important that you get it down into the bottom of the doll, as we're going to be decreasing again next round, and it can make it a little bit tricky to get down into the very bottom after that round. So try and add some stuffing to the bottom there. So there I have added some stuffing to the doll, and like I said, I just mainly added it around the bottom, and I haven't got very much in these last few rounds at the moment, as that will make it a little bit easier to keep working. So now next round, so round 27, is going to be the final round of the body, and we are going to do another decrease round. So we are going to do 3 single crochets and then 2 single crochets together all the way around. So start off by doing 1 single crochet into each of the first 3 stitches. Like that, and now do 2 single crochets together over the next 2, and it can be harder to work once you have added the stuffing, so I like to kind of push it down behind and that makes it a bit easier to get into those stitches. So like that, so there I have 3 single crochets and then 2 single crochets together over the next 2, and just keep repeating that for round 27. So I'm just coming to the end of round 27, so I have one last set of 2 single crochets together to work. And whilst we do that stitch, we are going to change colours. So we are going to change colour to the colour that you want the doll's skin to be. So I'm going to use a cream colour. So you want to go into the first stitch and start your first single crochet just as you normally would, and then go into the next stitch and start your next single crochet as you normally would. So there we have started 2 single crochets together, and normally we would yarn over and pull through all 3 of these loops to complete the stitch, but we're not going to do that. We're going to drop the yarn that we were using and then take our new colour. So like I said, I'm going with a cream, and then place it over the end of your crochet hook. Oops. And yarn over and pull it through all 3 loops. And there we have completed that last stitch. So we have completed 2 single crochets together, and we have changed colours at the same time. And there we have finished round 27, and we have finished the body of our doll. So we can now fasten off the colour that we were using for the body, and when you fasten off, make sure that you leave a nice long tail to weave in later. And now we can move on to round 28, and at the end of round 27 you should have 20 stitches around. So we are now on to round 28, and this is going to be the first round of the neck or the head, and we are going to do 1 single crochet into every single stitch for this round. But in this round, we are only going to be working into the back loop of each stitch. So if you have a look at our stitches, each stitch has a front loop, which is here, and then a back loop, which is here. And when we crochet, we normally go through both of those loops, but in this round, we are just going to be going into the back loop of each stitch. And what that is going to do, that is going to create a little ridge in between the body and the head. So it will create a little ridge, which gives a nice neat effect to separate those 2 different parts. So you want to remove your stitch marker, and we're going to do 1 single crochet into this next stitch here and just go down into the back loop. So here is our stitch, and we're just going to go into the back loop of this stitch here. And this can be a little bit tricky, especially if you have tight tension. It can be hard to get into that stitch. So what you could always do is go down 0.5 millimeters in crochet hook size. So we're using a 4 millimeter hook, but you could go down to using a 3.5 millimeter hook for this round only, and that will make it easier to get into the back loops of those stitches. But if you do that, make sure that you only do that for this round, and that when you were working with that hook, that you are trying to work really loosely so that your stitches don't end up being too small, and then it's hard to get into them next round. So go into the back loop of that first stitch there, and I'm actually just going to work over those 2 ends from where we changed colours, and work 1 single crochet, and then place the stitch marker into that stitch, and now you want to go into the back loop of the next stitch here, and I'm not going to work over those ends again, just go into the back loop of the next stitch and do 1 single crochet, and try not to pick up stuffing like I did there. So do 1 single crochet into the next stitch, then go into the back loop only of the next stitch and do 1 single crochet, and just keep doing this all the way around. So I have come to the end of round 28, so I have reached where I started, and you can see that by working into the back loop of each stitch, we get a little ridge which goes along the top here, which separates the body and the head. And now we can move on to round 29. And round 29 is another nice easy round. We're just going to be doing one single crochet into each stitch. And in this round, we're going to be going back to working as normal through both the front and back loop of each stitch. So remove your stitch marker and do one single crochet into the first stitch and go through both the front and back loop of each stitch. And place the stitch marker into that first stitch that you worked. And just keep repeating that all the way around, one single crochet into every single stitch. So like that, so we have come to the end of round 29, and at the end of that round you should have worked 20 single crochets. And now we can move on to round 30, and this is going to be our first increase round for the head. So we're going to do one single crochet into 3 stitches and then 2 single crochets into the next stitch all the way around. So remove your stitch marker. And do one single crochet into each of the first 3 stitches. So there's 1, and then there's 2, and then 3. So 3 single crochets, and now into this next stitch work 2 single crochets both into this one. So we're increasing just the same way as we did at the very start, and you want to keep repeating this all the way around for round 30. Do 1 single crochet into 3 stitches and then 2 into the next, then 1 into 3 and 2 into the next, all the way around. So I have finished working that all the way around for round 30, and at the end of that round you should have worked 25 single crochets. So we have added in 5 more single crochets, and now we can move on to round 31, and this is another increase round that follows the same pattern as last round, but last round we had 3 single crochets in between our sets of 2 single crochets, and in this round we have 4 single crochets. So we're going to do 1 single crochet into 4 stitches and then 2 single crochets into the next stitch all the way around. So start off by doing 4 single crochets. Like that, and now do 2 single crochets both into this next one. And just keep repeating that for round 31. So there we have come to the end of round 31, and at the end of that round you should have 30 stitches. And now we're going to move on to round 32, and this round follows the same pattern as before. It's another increase round, but in this round we're going to do 5 single crochets and then 2 single crochets into the next stitch all the way around. So you want to do 1 single crochet into each of the first 5 stitches, then 2 into the next, then 1 single crochet into each of the next 5 stitches, and then 2 into the next, all the way around. So there we have finished round 32, and you should have 35 single crochets at the end of that round. And now we're going to move on to round 33, which is our last increase round for the head. So this round follows the same pattern, and you can probably guess what we're going to do. We're going to do 6 single crochets and then 2 single crochets into the next stitch all the way around for this round. So we're going to do 1 single crochet into each of the first 6 stitches, then work 2 single crochets into the next stitch, and keep repeating that all the way around for round 33. And you should find that you work 40 single crochets in that round, so we are adding in 5 more stitches in this round as well. So work that all the way around for this round. So I have finished working that for round 33, and in that round you should have found that you did 40 single crochets. And now for the next 6 rounds, so for rounds 34 through to 39, so 6 rounds, you want to do 1 single crochet into every single stitch. And as you can see, I have already done that. So you want to finish off round 33, which is your last increase round, and then for rounds 34, 35, 36, 37, 38 and 39, so 6 rounds, you just want to do 1 single crochet into every single stitch. And in each of those rounds, you should find that you have 40 single crochets. So like I said, I have already done those rounds, so this is what you should have at the end of round 39. So you want to go ahead and do those rounds, and then once you have done that, we can move on to round 40. So this is what you'll have at the end of round 39 before we move on to round 40. And now before we move on to round 40, we are going to add a bit more stuffing to our doll. So I'm going to take my stuffing and I'm just going to add some more to the top of the body here and the neck, and then just add it so that there is some in the bottom of the head, as round 40 is going to be our first decrease round of the head. So you want to go ahead and add a bit more stuffing before we move on to that round. So I went ahead and added some more stuffing to the body and the neck. So the body is fully, I'm not going to add any more stuffing to this now, it's finished. And now we can move on to round 40. So to begin this round, you want to do 6 single crochets, or 1 single crochet into each of the first 6 stitches. So do 1 single crochet into the first stitch, and then 1 into each of the next 5, so do 1 into each of the first 6 to start. Like that. And now you want to do 2 single crochets together over the next 2 stitches. So do 2 single crochets together, just as we have done lots of times before. And just keep repeating that for round 40. So we're going to do 6 single crochets, then 2 single crochets together over the next 2 stitches, then 6 more single crochets, then 2 single crochets together all the way around. So there I have finished working that for round 40, and at the end of that round you should find that you now have 35 stitches. So we have gone down from 40 to 35, so we have cut out 5 stitches with that decrease round. And now we can move on to round 41, and this round is just another round of plain single crochet. So you just want to do 1 single crochet into every single stitch for round 41, and you should find that you have 35 stitches in that round. So go ahead and work that for that round. Okay, so there we are at the end of round 41, and now we can move on to round 42. And this is another decrease round, and it's very similar to round 40, but in this round, instead of doing 6 single crochets and then 2 single crochets together all the way around, we're going to do 5 single crochets and then 2 single crochets together all the way around. So start off by doing 1 single crochet into 5 stitches, placing the stitch marker into the first stitch of the round. So like that. So there we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and now you want to do 2 single crochets together over the next 2 stitches. And I am still trying to keep my tension really tight, especially around the head. It's really important to try and have nice tight tension so that your stitches are really close together and you don't have any little gaps, and it just makes it look a lot neater, and it also makes it easier when you want to add the face. So continue to work 5 single crochets and then 2 single crochets together all the way around. So like that, so we have finished round 42, and at the end of that round you should now have 30 stitches. So we have cut out another 5 stitches, and now we can move on to round 43, and this round is another round of plain single crochet, so I won't go over it, but you just need to do 1 single crochet into each stitch. So you'll remove your stitch marker, do 1 single crochet into the first stitch, place your stitch marker back into that stitch, and then do 1 single crochet into every single stitch around. And in that round you should find that you have 30 single crochets. So do a round of plain single crochet for round 43. So there we have finished round 43, and like I said, at the end of that round you should have 30 stitches, and that was actually our very last round of plain single crochet for the head. And now we can move on to round 44, which is another decrease round, and this follows the same pattern as the other decrease rounds, but in this round we're going to be doing 4 single crochets and then 2 single crochets together all the way around. So start off by working 4 single crochets, so like that. So there we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and now you want to do 2 single crochets together over the next 2 stitches. And just keep repeating that all the way around. So there we have finished round 44, and at the end of that round you should have 25 stitches. So we have cut out another 5 stitches, and now we can move on to round 45, and we are going to be going straight into another decrease round. So we're not doing our round of plain single crochet in the middle, we're going straight into another round of decreases, and we are going to be doing 3 single crochets and then 2 single crochets together all the way around. So do 3 single crochets, like that, and then 2 single crochets together over the next 2, and just continue this for this round. So I have come to the end of round 45, and at the end of that round you should have 20 stitches. And then what I did was at the end of round 45 I went ahead and added some stuffing to the head. So the next 2 rounds we're going to be decreasing again, so the hole at the top is going to be getting a lot smaller, so it's going to be really hard to get stuffing down at the bottom of the head here. So go ahead and add some stuffing to the head at the end of round 45, and you want to make the head quite firm, as we are going to be adding the face to the head, and it needs to be quite firm so that the face sits nicely on the head. So go ahead and add some stuffing at the end of that round, and then once you have done that we can move on to round 46, and this is our second to last round of the head. And in this round we're going to be doing another decrease round. We're going to do 2 single crochets, 1 into each stitch, and then 2 single crochets together over the next 2 all the way around. So you want to do 2 single crochets, 1 into each stitch, and it is a little bit tricky again as we now have the stuffing there, so just kind of take it slowly and push the stuffing down behind the stitch to make it a bit easier. So there we have 1 single crochet, and I have placed the marker into that stitch, and now we're going to do 1 into the next stitch. And I'm trying to keep my tension nice and tight still, and now we're going to do 2 single crochets together over the next 2. Like that. So there we have 1, 1, 2 together, and we're going to keep repeating that for round 46. 1, 1, 2 together, 1, 1, 2 together. So there I have finished working that all the way around for round 46, and at the end of that round you should now have 15 stitches. And now we are on to round 47, which is the final round finally of the main part of our doll. And in this round, in round 47, we're just going to do sets of 2 single crochets together all the way around, and you should find that you do that 7 times. So you should find that you work 7 sets of 2 single crochets together in that round, and that should leave you with 1 stitch left at the end of the round, and we're just going to leave that stitch empty and not work into that one. So for round 47 you want to do 2 single crochets together 7 times. So I'm going to do that for the first time. And now you could place a stitch marker into this first stitch here. So if you were a beginner, I would place a stitch marker into that first stitch, but I'm actually just going to count the number of times that I work that stitch. So there I have done that once, and now I'm going to do that for a second time. So a second set of 2 single crochets together, and then I'm going to do that a third time, and then a fourth, and fifth, and then 6th, and then finally 7th. So this is my 7th set of 2 single crochets together. And like I said, you should find that you have 1 stitch left at the end of the round, and we're just going to leave that stitch empty and we're not going to work into that one. So there we have finished round 47, and we have finished the main part of our doll. So now you can fasten off, so pull your yarn out and your hook, and you want to cut your yarn, leaving a really long tail end, as we can use this end to sew up the top of the head. So fasten off. So I'm going to fasten off, so cut this yarn, leaving a long tail end, and pull it through. So pull that yarn out. And then you want to take a yarn needle or a tapestry needle like this and weave that end through your needle, and we are going to sew up the top of the head. But before you do that, you want to take a little bit of stuffing and just add a tiny bit more stuffing to the top of the head there, just to stuff that last round or two. So I'm going to take a bit of stuffing, and a tip that I like to do is I kind of like to put it down in there using the end of my crochet hook, and that makes it a little bit easier. So there I have added the stuffing, and now the final thing that we need to do is sew up this opening. So we have our long end and we have threaded that through a yarn needle, and we are going to weave this needle and that end in and out of the stitches around the top to sew it together. So you want to go in from the inside out into the next stitch and pull that yarn through, and then go from the outside in to the inside, and make sure you're not picking up any stuffing, and pull the yarn through, and then come from the inside this time and go out, and then from the outside in. So we're weaving it in and out of these stitches around the top. So there I have reached where we started, and now you simply want to pull this tight, so pull this end tight, and that will close up the top of the head like that. And now you just want to kind of come inside and then go out to a stitch opposite where you finished off, and pull that through just to secure the top of that head there. And then you want to weave that end nice and securely into the inside, so secure it nicely into the top, and then you want to weave all of the other ends from this main section into the inside. And when you are weaving this one here down the bottom end in, make sure that you pull this nice and tight before you weave it in, so that you close up that magic circle. And there we have finished the main part of our doll. So we have the body and the head, and we have 2 more parts to do. We have the arms and the bonnet. So now we can move on to making the arms. So now we have finished making the main part of our doll. So we have done the body and the head, and we can now move on to the arms. And we have 2 arms, obviously, and both of them are made in the exact same way. So I'll show you how to do one, and then you can go ahead and make the second one in the same way. So to begin the arms, you want to start off by making a magic circle, and this is just the same thing as we did at the very start. You want to make a cross on your finger, and you want to use the cream yarn or your skin colour yarn. So make a cross on your finger and then go underneath the first loop of the cross, and then using your crochet hook, pick up the second loop of the cross and pull it through, and we can then move on to round 1. So to begin round 1 of the arms, you want to chain 1, and this chain 1 does not count as a stitch. And for round 1, we are going to do 5 single crochets into the magic circle. So 5 single crochets. So go down into the magic circle and do 1, and then 2, and keep going until you have 5. So like that. So there I have 5 single crochets, and now to finish off this round you want to close up the magic circle by pulling the tail end nice and tight. And there we have finished round 1, and we are not going to be working a slip stitch at the end of this round. And now we can move on to round 2. So round 2 is a nice easy round. We're just going to do 2 single crochets into every single stitch. So you want to start off by going down into the first stitch from round 1, and if you're not sure which stitch to go into, then you can count back 5 stitches. So count back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you want to go into this stitch, the first single crochet from round 1, and work your first single crochet into this one, and then take your stitch marker and place your stitch marker into that stitch. So we're going to be using our stitch marker to mark the first stitch of every round, and now you want to go down into that same stitch and work a second single crochet, and then you want to do 2 single crochets into the next stitch and 2 into the next, and just keep repeating that for round 2. So there I have finished working that all the way around for round 2, so I have reached my stitch marker, and at the end of that round you should have 10 single crochets, and if you do, we're ready to move on to round 3. So we are now on to round 3, and for the next 3 rounds, so for rounds 3, 4 and 5, you just want to do 1 single crochet into each stitch. So for round 3, you'll remove the stitch marker, work 1 single crochet into the first stitch of the round, place the stitch marker back into that stitch, and do 1 single crochet into every single stitch around. And then you want to do the same thing for round 4 and then round 5. So 3 rounds of plain single crochet, and in each round you should find that you have 10 stitches, and that is going to create this little part here of the hand. So do 3 rounds of 1 single crochet into every single stitch. So I'm just coming to the end of round 5, so I have 1 single crochet left to work, and whilst working this single crochet we are going to change colours. So you want to go down to work this last single crochet, so insert your hook into that last stitch and yarn over and pull up a loop. But you do not want to complete this stitch, so stop here right before the last step. So usually we would yarn over and pull through these 2 loops here to complete the stitch, but you do not want to do that. You want to drop the yarn that you are using and take your new colour. So this is going to be the colour of your little doll's sleeves. So take the new colour and place it over the end of your crochet hook and pull it through. So yarn over and pull it through. And there we have finished round 5. So we have worked that last single crochet and changed colours at the same time. And now you can fasten off the yarn that you were using. So you can fasten off this colour, and we're ready to move on to round 6. So to begin round 6, you want to remove your stitch marker, and we are going to start off by working 1 single crochet into this first stitch here, but we're just going to be working into the back loop of this stitch. So just as with the main part, in between the body and the head, we worked into the back loop of the stitches for this round here to create this little ridge to separate those 2 parts. We're going to do the same here. We're going to work into the back loop of each stitch for round 6, in between the hands and the sleeves, and that is going to give us a little ridge to separate them and make them look nice and neat. It gives this kind of separated effect to this little ridge. So we're going to start off by doing 1 single crochet into the back loop of the first stitch here. So we're going to work 1 single crochet into the back loop of the first stitch here. So here is our first stitch, and we have a front loop and then a back loop, and we're just going to go into the back loop, and this can be a bit tricky, especially with the angle that I'm at. So there, we are into that stitch, and work one single crochet, and I'm actually just going to work over those two ends from where we changed colours, and then you want to place your stitch marker into that stitch to mark the first stitch of round 6. So there we have done one single crochet into the back loop of the first stitch, and now we're going to do one single crochet into the back loop of the next stitch. So go into the back loop of the next one and do one single crochet, and then do the same thing into the next stitch, one single crochet into the back loop, and then the same into the next stitch, like that. So there we have done one single crochet into the back loop of each of the first 4 stitches, and now you want to do 2 single crochets into the back loop of the next. So we're going to go into this next stitch here, go down into the back loop only, and do 2 single crochets, and you want to repeat this for round 6. Do 4 more single crochets, 1 into each stitch, and then 2 single crochets into the next stitch, and remember just to work into the back loop. So there we have finished working that all the way around for round 6, and at the end of that round you should have 12 single crochets, and now we can move on to round 7. So remove your stitch marker, and this round is very similar to last round, but in this round we're going to be doing 1 single crochet into 5 stitches, and then 2 single crochets into the next stitch all the way around. So you should do that 2 times, and in this round we're going to be going back into working through both loops. So you want to work through the front and back loop of each stitch. So start off by doing 1 single crochet into the first stitch here, going through both loops, so working as normal, and place your stitch marker into that stitch, and then do 1 single crochet into the next stitch, and 1 into the third one along, and 4th, and 5th, and then you want to do 2 single crochets both into the next stitch, like that. And now repeat that one more time, 5 single crochets and then 2 into the next for round 7. Finished working that all the way around for round 7, and at the end of that round you should have 14 single crochets, and we can now move on to round 8. So for the next 5 rounds, so for rounds 8, 9, 10, 11 and 12, so 5 rounds, you just want to do 1 single crochet into every single stitch. So we're doing 5 rounds of plain single crochet, and in each round you should find that you have 14 single crochets, and I would recommend keeping a note of what round you are on, or if you have the written pattern, I have a chart on there which you can tick off as you go. So work 5 rounds of plain single crochet. So I have come to the end of round 12, so I did 5 rounds of plain single crochet, and then once I came to the end of that last round, I added a little bit of stuffing to the bottom of my arm. So I just added some stuffing to the bottom here, and make sure that your end from where you made the magic circle and these two ends from where you changed colours have been pulled through to the outside before you add the stuffing. And now we can move on to round 13, and this is going to be a decrease round. So what we're going to do is we're going to do 5 single crochets and then 2 single crochets together over the next 2 stitches 2 times. So I'm going to do 1 single crochet into the first stitch, placing the stitch marker into that stitch. And then I'm going to do a second single crochet into the next one, then a third into the next, and a fourth, and then a fifth. So 5 single crochets, and then do 2 single crochets together over the next 2 stitches. And just repeat that one more time, and that should take you to your stitch marker. So there we have finished working that for round 13, and at the end of that round you should have 12 stitches, and you can go ahead and add a little bit more stuffing to the arm. So now for the last part of our arm, so for the last 5 rounds, we're just going to do 1 single crochet into each stitch. So we're doing 5 more rounds of plain single crochet. So for rounds 14, 15, 16, 17 and 18, so the next 5 rounds, you just want to do 1 single crochet into each stitch. And in each round you should have 12 single crochets, and I would recommend keeping a note of what round you're on or ticking it off on the chart at the end of the written pattern, and make sure that you keep using your stitch marker correctly. So do 5 final rounds of plain single crochet. Finished round 18, so we have come to the end of our arm, and then when you get to the end of round 18 you want to fasten off. So pull your yarn out and your hook and cut your yarn, and make sure that you leave a nice long tail end, as you can use this to sew up the top of the arm and then sew it to the body. So, and then once you have come to the end of that round, you want to add a final bit of stuffing to the arm. So you don't want to add too much stuffing, as you don't want them to stick out too much out of the side of the body. So if you have a look at this one here, you can see I haven't added too much stuffing. They're quite squishy, and you especially don't want to overstuff them at the very top. Otherwise you will find that they will kind of stick out from the body and they won't look as nice. So don't add too much stuffing. I'm actually going to take just a little bit out of the top of this here, just like that. And then the final thing that we need to do for this arm is sew up the top. So you want to take your yarn needle again and thread that long end from where you fastened off through the needle, and we are going to sew up the top of the arm using the whip stitch. So thread the end through the needle. So to do the whip stitch, you want to fold the top of the arm in half, so make sure that all the stuffing is pushed down, and then fold it in half, and make sure that this part here where you changed colours is central on one of the sides. And you want to go in through the first stitch and then go in through the same stitch on the opposite side and pull the needle through. And then with the whip stitch, you always come back around to the same side. So we're going to come back around to the same side here and go in through the next stitch and the same stitch on the opposite side and pull the yarn through, pull the needle through. And then we're coming back around to the same side again, go through the next stitch and the same stitch on the opposite side and pull it through. And just keep doing this all the way along, so until you get to the end, and there we will have sewn up the top of the arm using the whip stitch. So like that. So there we have finished our first arm, so you can now go ahead and weave these ends in down the bottom if you want to. or you can leave them to the end. And when you weave this end in at the very bottom, make sure that you pull it nice and tight, so you pull that magic circle tight before you weave it in. So there we have finished the first arm, and you want to go ahead and make a second one in the exact same way. So you can go back in the tutorial, or if you have the written pattern, the instructions are all on there. And then once you have done both of the arms, we can move on to the bonnet. And this is the last part of our doll. So to begin the bonnet, you want to start off by making a slip knot. So to do a slip knot, take your yarn and take your finger and wrap the yarn around your finger once and then twice. Then take the first loop and pull it over the second loop, and then take the second loop and pull it all the way over your finger. You then want to take your crochet hook, go in through this space and pull tight. And there we have a slip knot, and we are now going to make our foundation chain. And for our foundation chain, we are going to chain 39. So you want to chain 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 39. So there I have finished working my foundation chain, and now we can move on to round 1 of our bonnet. So to begin round 1, we are going to do 1 single crochet into the second chain from the hook. So here is the first chain from the hook, and here is the second chain, and you want to go down into this chain, yarn over and pull up a loop, and then yarn over and pull through both loops on your hook. So there we have 1 single crochet into that chain, and we're just going to keep working single crochets all the way down our chain. So we're going to do 1 single crochet into this next chain, and then 1 into the next, and keep doing this all the way along, 1 into each and every chain. Coming to the end of round 1, so I have 1 last single crochet to work, so I have 1 last chain to work into, and whilst working this last single crochet we are going to change colours. So you want to go into this last stitch at the end here and start to work your single crochet, but stop right before the last step, drop the yarn that you are using and take your new colour, and I am just using 2 colours for my doll. I'm using cream and blue, but you could always introduce another colour here. Place it over the end of your hook and pull it through. And there we have finished round 1, and we have changed colours at the same time. And at the end of that round you should have 38 single crochets. And now you do not want to fasten off this colour, so do not fasten off the colour that you were using. You want to leave it attached to the ball, and we are going to work over it next round and pick it up again at the end of next round. So you should have 2 colours attached to your work at the moment. And now we can move on to round 2. So to begin this round, you want to chain 1 and turn using your new colour, and this chain 1 does not count as a stitch. So chain 1 and turn, and this round is really simple. We're just going to do 1 single crochet into every single stitch. But like I said, we are going to be working over the yarn that we just dropped. So I have this blue yarn here which I dropped at the end of round 1, and I'm going to work over that all the way throughout round 2 and then pick it back up at the end of the round. So you want to go down into this first stitch here, as our chain 1 did not count as a stitch, and work 1 single crochet, but remember to work over that yarn that you dropped. So go into the first stitch and work 1 single crochet, working over that yarn, and then do 1 single crochet into the next stitch. And I like to kind of pull this yarn tight, so pull the yarn that you dropped tight, and that will keep it nice and neat. And just continue to work single crochets all the way along, working over that yarn. So I'm just coming to the end of round 2, and I have 1 last single crochet to work. So I have 1 last single crochet at the end, and whilst working this single crochet we are going to change colours. So you want to go into this last stitch at the very end like that, and yarn over and pull up a loop, but do not complete the single crochet using this colour. Drop that one and then you can pick up the colour that you have been working over for this round. So we have been working over our first colour throughout this round, and we can pick it back up, and you might want to pull it tight to make sure that it's nice and neat and it hasn't bunched up at all along the row. And then you want to yarn over and pull through both loops and complete the stitch with that yarn. And there we have finished round 2, and we have changed colours at the same time. And now, just as we did before, you do not want to fasten off that yarn that you have just dropped, so you want to leave it attached to the ball, and then we can work over it next round and pick it up at the end of the next round. So there we have finished round 2, and we can now move on to round 3. So for the rest of our bonnet, so for the next 11 rounds, you just want to repeat round 2. So we're going to do 11 repeats of round 2. So for each round, you want to chain 1 and turn, and that chain 1 does not count as a stitch. And then you just want to do 1 single crochet into every single stitch along, working over the yarn that you dropped at the end of the previous round. And then whilst working the very last single crochet of the round, you want to change back to the yarn that you have been working over, and do not fasten off that colour that you dropped. So you want to do that all the way along for round 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way up to the end of round 13. So you're doing 11 repeats of round 2. So now once you have finished working all of those rounds of single crochet, so you should have 13 rounds in total, you will have a long strip, and we are going to turn that into our bonnet like this by folding that strip in half and then sewing it up using the whip stitch. So the same thing as we did with the arms, along the back, so along the foundation chain. And then we need to add some ties. So I have worked my rounds here, and what I'm going to do is fold this strip in half. So here I have my foundation chain at the back, so the foundation chain is going to go along the back of the bonnet, and I have folded it in half along the foundation chain, and then I have thread my end from where I made my slip knot through a yarn needle. And if you didn't leave a very long end, then you can just take another piece of yarn in the same colour and use that to sew up the back. And I have gone in through the same stitch on the opposite side, and I'm going to pull this yarn tight, and you just want to do the whip stitch the same way as we did at the top of the arms from along this section here, so from the bottom all the way up the top, sewing it together using the whip stitch along the foundation chain, and that is going to turn our long strip into a little bonnet. So sew it together. So then once you have finished sewing your bonnet together up along the back, the last thing you want to do is add the ties. So you can do your ties in whatever way you like, but for mine, I went where I finished off, so where I finished off the end of my last round, and using that space there, so using that same stitch that I finished off in, I chained 23, and then I did slip stitches back down that chain and all the way around the bottom until I got to the opposite side, and then I chained 23 again and then did slip stitches back down that chain until I reached this point where I started that tie, and then I fastened off and weaved that end into the inside. So it's really simple, just start where you finished off your last round, make a chain, slip stitch back down into the chain all the way around the bottom, so to make the bottom nice and neat, and then make another chain the same length and slip stitch back down that chain until you get to the main bonnet part again, so till you reach where you started that tie, fasten off and weave that end in. And then once you have done that, you can weave all of your other ends nice and securely into the inside, and we have finished our bonnet. And then once you have done that, so once you have completed your bonnet, you will have completed all of your doll. So we have the main section with the body and the head, we have both arms, and we have the bonnet. And the very last thing we need to do is sew the arms to the body and then also add our face. And I will show you how to do those steps now. To sew the arms to the body, you want to take this end from where you finished off doing your whip stitch with the arm and thread that through your yarn needle. And then you want to position the arms centered in the middle of the body. So the first thing you want to do is make sure that this color change is in the center back and that the color change from the arm is underneath, and you want to position the arm so it's right in the center here. And I sewed mine just underneath the ridge between the body and the head. So you can sew yours wherever you like, but I like to do mine quite high up. I don't like the way that it looks when the arm is halfway down the body. I'd much rather have it up nice and high. And then I just used this needle, so a nice sharp needle, and I went in through the arms and then into the body and then in through the arms and in through the body, doing the whip stitch all the way along. And then just to make mine a little bit more secure, I went underneath the arm and just did a stitch underneath to attach the arm to the body and to stop it from sticking out too much. But if you have really tight tension like me, it can be a little bit tricky to get into your tight stitches. So what you can do is take this end from where you fastened off and split it, and then to split it into two. So we are using a DK weight yarn. So there should be 4 little threads in your yarn. So you can split this in half, weave 2 of them in, and then use the other 2 to sew the arm to the body. And that would just make it easier if you have really tight tension. I'm going to see if I can sew it together without doing that first. I'm going to lay the arm in place, go in through the arm, and then go in through the body like this. Try not to pick up any stuffing and pull the needle through. So like that. So I went in through the arm and then in through the body, and then I'm going to come back around and go in through the next stitch here on the arm, and then go in through the next stitch or just along a little bit further on the body with my needle and pull this through. And that is how you sew the arm to the body. And it can be easier to pin it in place if that's what you'd like to do, but after you've done a few of them, it becomes really easy. So go ahead and attach the arm to the body. And then once you have done that, so once you have attached both arms and then weave those ends in nice and securely, the final thing you want to do is add the face. And I will show you how to do that now. So to add the face, we're going to start off by adding the eyes. And I would recommend putting the bonnet on your doll and working out where you want the eyes to sit. So this is what mine looks like. So this is where my bonnet finishes, and then I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows before I have added my eyes. So they're kind of central to the face. So I'm going to add the bonnet to this doll here, and then I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I still haven't attached the other arm onto this doll, but I'll do that afterwards. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rounds, and this is where I'm going to add the face, and you want to go in the center, so work out where you want your eyes. So I want mine here and then here. And I have taken my yarn needle, and then I have taken a piece of brown yarn, so light brown yarn. I felt like the black yarn was too much of a contrast with the face colour that I have used, so I just used brown, but you can use whatever yarn you like. And I took, it's a piece of DK weight yarn, so there were 4 strands or 4 threads in that yarn, and I split it in 2, so I'm just using 2 of those threads, so I have half for one eye and then half for the other eye. And what we're going to do is we're going to go in through a stitch and then come up and out of the stitch right above it like that, and then we're going to pull this yarn through, leaving a little end at the bottom there, and then we're going to come back around, and we're going to go around this one stitch 2 or 3 times depending on how big you want the eyes to be. So come back in through the same stitch and then come out of the same stitch again and pull this through and hold this end down, and then we're going to do that again. So back through the same stitch and out and pull it through, and then what we're going to do is go down in through this stitch here that you just came out of, go back down into that space and come out somewhere else in the head far away and pull this tight, and then that will bring that yarn away, and then you can pull this tight and cut it off and it will go inside the head. And now with this end here, I'm actually just going to come down and out like that, and then I'm going to weave this end in and then pull it through just to make the eye a little bit bigger, and then you can do the same with this one. Pull this tight, cut it off, and it will be inside the head. So there we have added one eye, and now we're going to add a second eye along the same row, but 5 stitches in between. So you want 5 stitches in between the eyes. So go ahead and add your second eye in the same way. So there I have added for the eyes, and then for the nose you want to use the same method, but you want to do it in between the eyes with 1 round between them. And I did not split the yarn, and I went across 2 stitches. So I did that sideways, and that gives us a little button nose, and you want to weave the ends in the same way by going in, going out somewhere else in the head, pulling it tight and cutting it off, and it will bounce back into the head. And there we have finished our little dolls. So we have done the body, we have added the arms to the body, we have the head, and we have added the face to the head, and we have our cute little bonnet. And make sure that all of your ends are weaved in nice and securely. So that is it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it and found it easy to follow. Please make sure to subscribe to my channel for more crochet videos. And in the description box below this video, I will leave a link to where you can find the written pattern. So the written pattern is really handy if you want to make more than one, and the instructions are really clear, and there is a tick-off chart at the end that you can tick off each round as you go. And in the description box, I will also leave links to my Instagram and Twitter accounts. So I always like to post updates and pictures on there, especially Instagram. And thank you again for watching. Bye.